I really am. A zeement thing, I can't say that, but as far as the ditches and the roads in our area, it really needs to be addressed because we have corrosion in the Belvedere area. Some of our homeowners have the backyards are gone, and the mayor has addressed it, and Mr. McDowell and Paul Livingston. So I'm glad to see that, and the Fair Road area, because we definitely need that addressed. And so I didn't come up here to argue with you all. I came up here to thank you. You know, just come in our neighborhood, look at what we're going through, because we definitely have flood areas in the Belvedere area that's taking over the people's homes. I'm one of them. I can't stay in my house. Been out of it for 2 years, and we need the ditches closed because of the drainage. So I'm proud of y'all. I'm not going to fuss today.
Get her
Thank you.
Which all of you know me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm Jim Sewell. I live in the Heritage Hills subdivision off of Wilson Boulevard. I'm here on the annex. I've heard what the mayor has said, so I'll listen to what y'all have to say, but I am opposed to it for many reasons. I look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
My name is Gil Young. I live in the Heritage Hills neighborhood as well. We've lived there for over 10 years, and we have not had any interference from the city, and we seem to have been doing just fine. This seems like an increase in taxes and no appreciable benefit to the people who live in the region.
No comments, no
And
comments.
it seems like it was kind of snuck on the agenda tonight. Nobody I know has heard of this thing until a few days ago. And that seems a little underhanded. And we would like you to address these concerns.
Thank you, thank you.
Well, Madam Chair, can I ask, I'm really kind of confused because I'm not sure what is on the agenda that people are talking about, and especially this particular area. Yeah, this particular area. It seems like it's all one area who is under the misinformation that we're about to annex them. So is there some information that's gotten out that hasn't been shared with City Council?
No.
There is no plan to annex.
There is no plans.
Please, if you all listen and if you follow us real closely, you'll find out that some of your remarks may be premature, but we're working on it, okay? So, Mr. Malinowski, does that conclude?
No, Madam Chair, we still have a couple others. For the second time, I'll call Representative Joe McEachern. He either wants to hear his name or he's too busy talking down there.
Okay. And this is just for information, and we do not allow all the clapping and stuff, so please keep your remarks down so everybody can hear. We're just here to get your information tonight and hear from you tonight. Representative McEachern, please state your name and your address.
Joe McEachern, State Representative, 1554 Jerome Drive, Columbia, in the upper northern part of Columbia. And I do apologize, Councilman Malinowski. My leader back there had me tied up. He was chastising me, so I just wanted to kind of carry that on. But I want to recognize, Madam Chairman, Mr. Mayor, council members that's here, and also the elected officials that's here. And I saw Representative Tom Rutherford. I think I saw Solicitor Dan Johnson that was here. I don't know if he left. And one of the things, too, is to recognize the fact of what we do in our communities. I'm going to try to make it quick because I know...
2 minutes. You about a minute now.
One of the things is just it was on the agenda we look at any time we'd like to kind of convey it to you. And then the question is just simply if you allow us to be a part of the conversation. That's the thing we come in. A 23-year-old deputy years ago moved in this community almost 40 years ago. And over the years, we built these relationships. Matter of fact, over 20 years ago, our councilwoman, Gwen Kennedy, started a sewer project in that area. We continued. Matter of fact, just a few months ago, we continued all the way for 20 years to a project over in Hollywood Hills to finish up. So when you start talking about that, it's just about relationships. It's about quality of life issues. The Sheriff Department under the Sheriff, Leon Lott and his deputies, have come in our communities, built up relationships, understand the people, know the people by first name. They come in these communities. The county itself, have worked in these communities when it comes down to taking care of the garbage and all those kind of issues day-to-day to improve quality of life. The county has just done a job. The Ombudsman's office have done a magnificent job. That way that folk have come to understand and love the fact to have these communications and relationships. So when you start talking about these areas and you start talking about the community folk that we have, we actually talking about just the quality of life. And then annexation only going to do one thing, disrupt that quality of life. And if you allow me to do as I go to my seat, and that may help the ones that's in the room, all the ones in this room from this area, if they'll stand just to show you they're here at this time about annexation, they'll stand.
Okay, so Joe, so we have to cut you off because everybody have 2 minutes. Okay, thank you very much for your comment.
And I think it's telling as the next speaker comes up, is that a number of you are here because you received some faulty information about annexation or the intentions of the city regarding annexation. And hopefully the presentation that you received from staff is one that you will find some value in. As to whether or not you choose to be annexed, no one in the city wants to annex you if you don't want to be a part of the city. But it's your information. It's your prerogative to have the information. So I know a lot of you, because I've actually received some of the phone calls from people who get pretty whipped up. And I would say this. I want to give a lot of credit to Councilwoman Kennedy because she stays on us and she makes sure that she gets good, clear answers to questions. No one's going to force you guys to become residents of the city. And just as a point of edification, people who live in the city are also people who live in the county. We live in the county. We pay county taxes. We're all in this together. So just as we move on in this discussion, a very quick quote from our dear former President Abraham Lincoln, and I hope will begin to influence the spirit of these conversations moving forward. We are not enemies, but friends. We must not be enemies. The passion may have strained, it must not break our bonds of affection. The mystic chords of memory will swell again when touched, as surely there will be by the better angels of our nature. We're in this together, y'all, whether we want to be or not. I love my police chief just like I love my sheriff. I see fantastic services rendered by the county and the city, by Unified Metropolitan Fire Department, by private contractors serving all of us everywhere. This is not a discussion on taking something from anyone or making anyone do what they don't want to do. We recognize in South Carolina the importance of private property rights and your independence to make decisions for you and your family, and we respect that. So let's get the information, and whenever someone brings you something that might not sound right, or might not smell right, or might not sound informed, then challenge them to actually give you real facts. Because I will tell you that usually those opinions are not backed up by facts. So we're going to get some facts today. Have a chance to challenge them, have a chance to raise those questions. While you may not live in the city of Columbia, I work for you. Or you may live in the city of Columbia, all the members of City Council will work and endeavor to meet your needs. Our staff will work to meet your needs, regardless of whether you live inside the four corners of the city. We work for you. We're all public servants. So I want you to remain comfortable in that. Receive the information. We'll make sure the information is available online, and it's also available in written format, so you can consume it for your families. You can consume it for your needs. You can consume it for your equine needs and other horses and everything else. This is not a discussion as may have been painted for some of you when people asked you to come here tonight. So let's receive the information, let's receive it in a clean heart, and let's remember that we're not enemies, we're friends, we're family. We're all in this together, guys. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Hey, Chairwoman Dickinson, Mayor Benjamin, we have three more speakers, three more people that have signed up to speak. They are Leroy Gaylord, Larry Montgomery, and Kenneth Murray. Could you step forward, please?
They gonna pay. Okay. I know he is.
I don't know who it was that passed, but we'll find out. That's not the guy that mentioned it. Okay.
I'm Larry Montgomery, and I'm speaking about water issue. Councilperson was George Dickinson before one time, and then Ms. Kennedy, and now I'm back to Ms. Kennedy. And so this is still an issue and something that the city's not working with the county about water. We have an issue on our road called Largest Street. I'm at 210 Largest Street. The city just came in there, ran a line to somebody who just built a house on the left-hand side of our road, but yet we can't get a main line on our road because the county's trying to pave our road, a dirt road we've been trying to get paved for over 30 years. And because of the city's not working with the county a little bit, we can't get our road paved, so now this project is being put beside, and we've been trying to get our road paved for, anybody lives on a dirt road, and water, sewer on that end too also, so it's a project, but I'm going to listen to what y'all got to say. They told me it's going to be discussed, so I'm waiting on that at all. I've been talking to my councilperson, Ms. Kennedy, so I just want to bring that up, but that's all I got to say real quick right now.
Thank you.
Okay.
That concludes the remarks of the citizen input.
And then we had,
I think everybody else passed.
did the other two pass?
I think so.
Murray and Gaylord passed.
Okay, thank you
Okay.
so very much for your citizen input. Next, we have joint resolutions. The first one will be Richland County and City of Columbia proclamation recognizing Richland County Library on receiving the 2017 Museum of Science National Medal. Is anyone from the library here? Come on, Steve.
Yes, ma'am. I think we'd be hard pressed to find a better investment of public dollars in our Richland County Public Library, and want to take this opportunity to recognize. Come on, let's do it.
You think we can get there? This is a resolution honoring Richland County Library winners for the 2017 National Medal for Museum and Library Services. And so it reads, whereas Richland County Library, a vibrant contemporary system that provide resources and information that advance the Midlands and offer citizens state-of-the-art technology, and I'm out of breath because I got a cold. Technology, literally cultural programs, 11 busters facilities located throughout the county, and whereas Richland County Library is committed to setting new standards for what a public library can do to positively impact the community as winners of the working daily to break down barriers and ensure that the people have access to the resources and support they need to improve their quality of life. And whereas back-to-back years as a finalist, the Institute of Museum and Library Services named Richland County Library as the winner of the 2017 National Medal for Museum and Library Services, the national highest honor given to museums and libraries. And, well, y'all were working. And whereas Richland County Library was recognized as an extensive reach in the community, including following areas: response to October 2015 historical flooding, development social awareness tasks, participating in the White House Connect Ed challenges, providing life skills to detainees at the Richland County Annexation Detention Center, the evolution of this business center, career center, research center, and many other literacy. I can do it, I finish. And so, whereas the library became one of the 10 winners in the 2010 National Medal, we were selected from 30 national finalists, gaining attention as the top library in the county. And now, therefore, be it resolved that Richland County Council, George Dickerson of District 2 in Richland County, do hereby resolve September 19, 2017, a date to honor Richland County Library throughout Richland County, South Carolina, to encourage all business and community members to take advantage of the resources available at the Richland County Library and to celebrate its many contributions. And that is signed by the Honorable George Dickerson and Kim Roberts, our clerk. I'm just...
joking, guys. I'm not going to do the proclamation. Substantially the same proclamation recognizing the incredible leadership of the men and women who make up our fantastic public library system. This library system was incredible. Prior to the most recent investment of public dollars through our bond, since the investment, we're starting to see an incredible return on investment for the people, and particularly for the young people, but all people of Richland County. And we're so proud of this accomplishment. This may indeed certainly be the very first time we've done the joint resolution proclamation and done it in this case, and we're proud to present it to the Richland County Public Library.
Madam Chair, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to thank you for this honor. Richland Library is honored and humbled to be recognized as one of the top 5 libraries in the country. Receiving this medal is a major accomplishment, one that wouldn't have been possible without the hard work and dedication of our extraordinary staff, some of which are with me, and also our board. I also have 2 of our board members with us tonight. 2 of our staff that are here demonstrate this high level of care and service every day and were instrumental in the efforts that led to this recognition surrounding the flood. Maite Valesco Nicolas and Lee Patterson use their incredible skills to each day to make connections in our community. Again, we'd like to thank Richland County and the City of Columbia for this recognition tonight, and we are proud to serve the citizens of Columbia and Richland County. Thank you very much.
He has it right there. Right there. Give it. Oh, yeah.
Our second resolution, as we get into the meat of the agenda, we did want to make one more recognition, recognizing the historic naming of the first female president of Benedict College since its founding in 1870. Please clap for Dr. Artis. On June 30th of this year, Dr. Artis was unanimously approved by the Board of Trustees at Benedict College as the 14th president of Benedict College. We know it's uniquely interesting that this college, that was founded by a woman, Bathsheba Benedict, indeed took 147 years to get its first female president. For the second time in history, Dr. Artis has earned the distinct honor of serving as the first female president of a collegiate institution. As she comes to Benedict College from her stint at Florida Memorial University, where she served as the 13th and first female president of the university's 138-year history. She has earned a doctorate in higher education leadership and policy from Vanderbilt University, and she holds a Juris Doctorate degree from the West Virginia University College of Law. She also has a certificate of fundraising management, so everyone hold your wallets, from Indiana University, and a certificate of mastery in prior learning assessment from DePaul University.
Now, whereas she is a member of the President Advisory Board for the Title III Administration, the Educational Testing Service President Advisory Council, the National Board of Directors for the United Negro College Fund, is an education advisor to the United States Secretary of Homeland Security, and earlier this year she was appointed to the Board of Directors on the Council for Independent Colleges. And whereas Dr. Artis is a profile speaker, critical thinker, and fierce advocate for educational access, has been recognized for her work locally and nationally. And now, therefore, be it resolved that Councilwoman Joyce Dickerson, Richland County Council, and the Mayor, Steve Benjamin, of the City of Columbia, would like to welcome Dr. Rosalind C. Artis to Benedict College and our community. We look forward to your continued commitment and passion for education, youth development, and services to the community and beyond. So therefore today, this is signed by the Honorable Joyce Dickerson and the Honorable Steve Benjamin on this September the 19th, 2017. Thank you.
I want to
belabor a lengthy agenda except to say thank you. I feel very, very welcomed in Richland County and in Columbia, and look forward to many, many, many years serving as the president of the finest college in the Southeast, Benedict College. So for those of you who are alums, I look forward to meeting you. For those of you who are would-be supporters and donors, I really look forward to meeting you. Thank you. Have a blessed evening.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, and I think that Councilwoman Myers and I would love to also, and City Manager Wilson would also like to recognize that Dr. Artis is also a distinguished member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated.
Thank you very much. That's exactly right.
Okay. Okay. Number seven. You're good. All right, so now we're at the report of the county attorney on potential items for executive session items.
Madam Chair and members of council, these are the following items that qualify for executive session. Item 8A.
Larry, make sure you speak into the microphone. I'm not sure people behind you
I'm
can
sorry.
hear you.
Item 8.
You got to pull, yeah. If you can turn the volume up, that'd be great, but I think if we pull the microphones very close, it makes it a little bit easier.
Item 8A, Unified Fire Service Contract, that's a contractual matter. Item 8B, Intergovernmental Agreement, that's the 911 Center. Item 8E, Transportation Penny Program, Utility Relocation, that's for legal advice to the extent that the council has any questions about that. That's item E1 and 2. Item 8G, Utility, City Water, and Sewer Utility Expansion. That would also be for legal advice. And item 8H, the fee for services as it relates to Alvin S. Glenn Detention Center, that is a contractual matter. So, Madam Chair and members of council, those would be the items that will qualify for executive session. To the extent that you have any questions about them, we'll take those up at the end of the agenda.
Thank you. And we do not have any outside attorneys, is that correct?
No, we do not.
Thank you very much. Okay, does that complete the executive?
That completes my report, Madam Chair.
Okay, so now we're 9. Ongoing discussion for joint items for further review by committee and staff. This is for information only, and I'm not sure who I turn this over to. Is Miss Teresa. I turn it over to you. Wilson, Ms. Wilson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would just ask, Madam Chair, Mayor Benjamin, is it your prerogative to go in the order of the items as they're listed? I know there was some mention of reshuffling some of the items due to particular interest or not. We can continue in the order as listed, or would both the Mayor and Madam Chair like to reorder?
Well, we're not taking any formal action tonight. We're not set up for that. It seems like the greatest benefit, obviously, is to use this joint forum as an opportunity to share as much information in as transparent a manner as possible, and also have the opportunity for us as policymakers to get all the same information at the same time, which I will tell you is also unique. So I said, let's go through the agenda. Let's maybe ask all presenters to keep their presentations as tight as possible, make them as informative as possible. Maybe at least, and I can't speak for County Council, if we have follow-up questions, we can hold our questions until the end of presentations. I'm not sure what protocol is at the county. Yeah, so let's keep it tight. And obviously, while you're looking at and speaking to us, it's more important that the folks behind you are able to hear you. So pull the microphone close. Let's keep it very close, and let's just share information. Let's just go in the order in which it's received. Understanding that we're not taking any actions tonight, you all. This is just an opportunity for all of the public, our citizens, our corporate citizens, our nonprofit partners, our legislators, all to have the same information at the same time, presented in the same manner, in the same spirit. But obviously, some of us love the microphone a little bit better than others. So let's keep it moving. Let's keep it moving. All right. So yeah, let's just move on.
Absolutely. The first item is item A, the Unified Fire Service Contract. We have staff from the city and county, Mr. S. Allison Baker, the Senior Assistant City Manager, and of course Fire Chief Aubrey Jenkins, as well as Director of Richland County Emergency Services, Mr. Michael Bird. I would just give some comment, Mr. Mayor, Madam Chair, and all members of both councils, that we have over the past few months worked together, both staffs, with Fire Chief Jenkins to come up with various responses to points of consideration that were proposed. And what I asked Fire Chief Jenkins to do is, if council would like to receive on those points of clarification, points of information, as we took them based upon Richland County's input. And so we feel that as a staff recommendation, at least on the city's behalf, that we are certainly excited to move forward with the Unified Fire Contract as we have had it, and with any additional input from both councils tonight after we go through these points of consideration. So I would turn it over to Fire Chief Jenkins, if that is okay with you, to work through those. I know that Richland County Council had received a document, a draft contract, and I don't know that we have had the opportunity to review any comments you had from that particular contract, but I do believe the points of consideration that were originally attempted by staff do cover any considerations that any of you would have, and so I would just ask him to go through those, if that's okay. And Mr. Baker for either or. Maybe he was called, hope not, to okay.
Madam Chair. Oh, I'm sorry. Got to talk in the mic. Madam Chair, Council, County Council, Mr. Mayor, City Council, to our City Manager, and to our County Administrator. First of all, let me say thank you for this opportunity. I am very motivated just seeing you all up there working together, and that just takes me into, you know, what you have now is a fire service that's working well together. And, you know, and I think when you look at the example of what we're doing and what you're doing, it really shows your citizens that we have a very vibrant government, but we also have a very vibrant and a well-working fire service. Without getting into the meat of the contract, I actually looked at the contract, both contracts. I think that there are a lot of discussions that need to be done on both sides, but I just want to talk about some benefits of this contract. And based on the benefits is that it is a very seamless service. I do think that it is financially great to have this service, because I think it really saves both the city and the county financially. I think also, but the biggest thing that I see is that the citizens really benefit from this seamless service. It doesn't matter if it's in the city or if it's in the county. We respond to both the city and the county. I can reflect on a time when there was a fire on 601, which is deep on the other side of the county, but we actually had a truck from our Harbison station respond to that fire. So, sorry. Now, it does bring challenges. The biggest challenge for me is, is 2 seats of government. Now, I feel like I work for 11 people on one side. I work for 7 people on the other side. I report to a city manager and a county administrator. So I got several bosses that I report to, but my biggest bosses are the citizens that we all work for. What I'm up here doing is, like, I'm asking both councils to kind of put it back on the staff for us to come up with a very vibrant, workable fire contract that I'm not looking for anything that benefits Aubrey Jenkins. What I'm looking for is something that benefits the citizens of the city of Columbia and Richland County. Those are the people that I work for. Those are the people that I'm sworn to keep safe. I think it's evident that this fire service worked because if you look at the ISO rating, and I have to always revert back to that, and I would tell you when we start doing that, when we start going through that rating, I do think we had some naysayers, some folks who didn't want it to work. I really believe that. However, we were diligent in what we were doing, and we put forth a valiant effort. Our firefighters, to me, are the greatest. That's why we have a less than 1% across the nation of Class 1 in the city, and around 2% across the nation of 2 in the county. And I just believe that if we continue to work together, work out our differences, there are going to always be differences. You know, when you talk about running a system as big as ours, a county-wide system, but it benefits our citizens, and we are there to do whatever we need to do to make sure that this continues to be a seamless, vibrant, and economical service. Some may question about the cost. Well, you know, 5 years ago when I bought a 5-gallon bucket of paint, it probably cost me $100. If I buy that same 5-gallon bucket today, it's probably going to cost me over $200. So it's not so uniquely to the fire service. It's unique to the trends and time that we're in when you're talking about costs. I had the privilege of being in a summit. It was 50 fire chiefs invited to this summit from across the United States. I had the opportunity to go there. And as you sit around, you know, fire chief, we always talking about, we kind of brag on what we do. And as I was talking to these fire chiefs from different parts, and I'm talking about some very upscale fire departments, as I began to talk to them, we started talking about what we do here in Richland County, City of Columbia, and what they do. There was an air of jealousy on some of the chiefs because they would love to be in my shoes, working with both councils, working with both governments, and having a vibrant, flowing fire service that we have. So I didn't want to get into the meat of this contract, and I know my time is up. I see the council, I see the chair just motion to me, but I just want to end and say that we have an opportunity here in the City of Columbia and Richland County to be the forerunner and to do what so many counties that I've talked to would love to be doing, and that is a seamless operational fire service. So I'd be glad to entertain any questions.
I just wanted to say thank you, Chief Jenkins, for that, and just gentle reminders to all of our staff persons as they present to please be as brief as possible. I think that Chief was wise to not go through every point. We provided those points of considerations to you, but we're certainly seeking direction on if you all, both bodies, want the staff to resume the negotiations going back through the various points of consideration as they've been outlined to you. It's very important to us that you see the responses that we've given to the various concerns or suggestions, and I think we're very close to getting a unified fire service agreement back in place if that is the will of both the councils for us to continue to work through those issues. And I don't know if Mr. Byrd needed to also present. Mr. Shields, okay.
Mr. Byrd is there.
Thank you.
Okay. In addition,
Thank you, Chief.
in addition, a gentle reminder that's come from our clerks and from staff here at the Convention Center to please remember for all council members that your mics are hot, so you may want to turn them off if you're not talking. I think they're getting some feedback.
Mr. Byrd, if you had some comments.
Madam Chair, if I could just say one thing real quick. Madam Chair, County Council, and Mayor and City Council, we at least at the staff level, we're very pleased with the way discussions have been going with regard to the fire contract. Where it stands at this point is it is under review and is on the County Council's agenda for October 3. So that is coming up, and we expect that once council has given its direction, that will place staff in the position to forward it back to the city. We believe on our best case scenario that will occur on October 10, and so it is our intent to move this forward. Like the city manager, we need your direction. And so what I've asked Mr. Byrd to do is to be brief, but to just give a little sense of where we are as a county as we move this forward. Okay.
Thank you very much. It's the mission of Richland County to provide essential services in an efficient and effective manner to better the lives of our citizens. And the fire service is certainly one of the major services that we can provide that are essential to our citizens. I concur with everything the chief said. Ms. Wilson, Mr. Seals, we have worked on some of the details of getting an agreement together. If you look at the agreement in your packet, you can see it's pretty extensive. There are a lot of details to go over, and I feel certain that we will get there. We have met several times, as Mr. Seals said. We will have a draft back to our council very shortly on the 3rd, and hopefully get it back over to the city by the 10th. So I'll entertain any questions if you have any.
I think I'd say just a very direct response to Mr. Seals' comments. It's great that conversations are moving along post-haste, at least as it relates to our position. We believe that the Unified Fire Service is one of the very best things that we've done as two local governments, and we need to continue to see it grow and prosper. The ISO rating is something that we ought to be proud of. All the men and women of Richland County and the city of Columbia. And I know that one issue that's been raised and raised a few times is obviously there's a great deal of point in regional pride, and obviously sometimes it's called the Columbia Fire Department, sometimes it's called Columbia Richland, sometimes it's called Richland Columbia, but just making sure that however we continue with our branding for citizens, making sure that safety remains first and the ability for people to reach emergency services and first responders remains first, but also giving some additional attention just to the branding portion. But yes, please, hurry up and come back to us with something we can work with. And we appreciate your leadership, collective leadership. And thank you, Chief Jenkins, for all you do.
Thank you.
Sure. I guess I've been deemed the reader for all of the items rather than going back and forth with Mr. Seals. Okay, the item B, Intergovernmental 911 Center. I think we would ask Mr. Byrd to come forward for that item, Director of Richland County Emergency Services.
Thank you, Ms. Wilson. Where we are currently is the agreement that, the full agreement that was last executed by both councils expired on June 30th of 2016. A one-year extension was signed, taking it to the end of 17. We have implemented a second extension that will be effective till June 30th of 2018. The second or the last extension has language in there to make it clear that we, Richland County, are looking to establish a 911 center staffed by the county. That was the intent of that. And that will be up for discussion in the next year, to work out details or to work with the city on becoming a part of that or staying a part of that. There are a lot of options that are available to us and the city as well. a site has been acquired for the new center, and it is needed whether we stay together or whether we're separate. The site that the 911 center is currently in is really small, and they need additional space as well. So that's a brief overview. I'll be glad to entertain any questions or turn it over to Mr. Baker.
Mr. S. Ellison Baker, Senior Assistant City Manager, and Kimberly Gathers, our 911 Communications Director.
Mr. Mayor, Chairperson Dickerson, as Chief Jenkins stated, it is a pleasure to be before you as a group working together. It has been communicated through the extension of the agreement that there is an intent to sever the relationship with the city as it currently exists. I also read in the council briefing notes from the June 27th County Council meeting that there was some concerns raised about the complaints that had been raised that the city had not addressed. I will feel the need to say that all complaints that come into the 911 center come to the director or to my office are addressed adequately and corrective action taken. I think it's important to note that in 2016 there was 1,122,589 calls received at the 911 Communication Center. There were 49 complaints. 15 of those complaints were citizen-generated, 24 were agency-generated. Out of the 49 complaints, 23 were sustained, which means that they were found to be true. While corrective action was taken, that represents 0.000204% of the calls that come into that 911 center. In 2017, there was one to date. There has been 1,019,739 calls, 39 complaints, 18 are citizen-generated, 21 are agency-generated. Out of the 39, 25 were substantiated, which again is 0.00245% of the calls. We recognize that no call that's not correctly taken is too many calls. We don't want that to happen at all, but given the volume of calls, we believe that the staff does an excellent job. The current facility is inadequate and has been for a number of years. We are making and have made a number of changes in that facility to increase the effectiveness and efficiency of our operation. There are cameras and take-home radios that the director and the assistant director might monitor the work of the staff during the night. I also read in the briefing note for today that the city is welcome or able to participate in the new planned facility. We do need to know and would like to, in advance, discuss what that means. I believe that if the relationship is severed, the divorce at best would be difficult, but it can happen. But please, County Administrator, Mr. Seals, Ms. Wilson, give us an opportunity in advance to determine what that participation looks like, where we go from here. I think we do an excellent job. And if you have any questions for me, technical questions, Director Gathers, I'd be glad to answer those questions.
Madam Chair.
So,
Madam Chair, it appears to me that this may require some policy decisions on our behalf, and I'd hope you'd consider in the near future to appoint an ad hoc committee from council so we can work through some of those potential policy issues.
that's your recommendation, Mr.
Yes.
And you're asking me to appoint
Yeah, just consider appointing an ad hoc committee to go through some of those potential policy issues.
I can only speak for myself, but I do hope that we can work together to have a seamless operation like we have with the fire department, which is working well based on the ISO ratings that we currently have. And I think us working together allows us to pool our resources and save taxpayer money. So I would just ask the county staff to please continue working with city staff. I think that's an excellent idea that Mr. Livingston have to appoint an ad hoc committee because I certainly would like to work forward and work with the city on this endeavor. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any further comments?
Just one brief comment, Madam Chair.
Ms. Myers, you recognize.
Thank you. Just, if Mr. Livingston is amenable, I might suggest that the committee that is formed maybe have a joint work session with a mirrored joint committee from the city so that we might work out the differences together. So not just a ad hoc from the county, but as well to have a work session with a similar committee from the city.
Okay, Mayor Benjamin, you heard that?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so Mayor Benjamin and I, we will appoint an ad hoc committee to work on this endeavor. Okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. If there are no further comments, Ms. You have the floor, Ms. Teresa.
Item C, annexation. Krista Hampton, Director of the City of Columbia's Planning and Development Services Department.
I think I have a presentation coming up.
And we're going to make sure if there aren't already, all attachments and documents should be available online to people who may want to review these at home at some other point, right? So.
Absolutely. And much of this material is already attached to the agenda.
Okay, fantastic.
So we welcome everybody to take a look.
Ms. Devine?
Mr. Mayor and Madam Chair, just as Ms. Hampton is pulling this up, I guess several months ago, I received a call from an unincorporated area representing down Wilson Boulevard. The neighborhood association heard some concerns. They had some questions. Mr. Fellows and Andrew, Mr. Livingood went to the meeting along with myself and were able to answer any questions. And so, Madam Chair, I'd like to offer that if any of the council members have constituents that may not be here and hear the presentation have concerns, instead of continuing to perpetuate erroneous information, maybe it would be more useful for council members and or staff to come to a community meeting and be able to answer questions one-on-one. And I think that would be better if you hear other concerns.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms.
Madam Chair.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Duval?
Madam Chair, members of the two commissions here, I had about 40 years experience on annexation in my career at the Municipal Association and working in local government. I had the honor of presenting to Richland County Council on two occasions. I think that two of my alumni, Mr. Pierce and Mr. Livingston, might be on the panel tonight. I have to tell you, though, that when I read the county's presentation on annexation, I had to go take another blood pressure pill to keep my blood pressure from getting too high. I did not appreciate the biasness of the presentation, and I can understand why the citizens that are here tonight are confused about annexation if you've read the presentation that was presented to us in our briefing package. Annexation in South Carolina is an extremely difficult thing
for a city to do. You will not be annexed against your will because the laws are so restrictive that, as the county's own plan says, the city of Columbia has not used anything but the 100% annexation method for a number of years. If we decide that we would like to come in and annex, it takes 75 to 100% of the people to sign the petitions to get you in. If we use the voting methods, it takes 25% of the people signing a petition to have an election, and then you have an election. So it is extremely restrictive, and if we can't prove to you that you're better off inside the city than you are in the unincorporated area, then you should not vote to come in. I will pledge to you that if you have agricultural interests, that the city of Columbia is not interested in taking in horse farms and cattle breeding areas. We are looking for urban areas. In North Carolina, there's a formula that once an area becomes urban, it becomes municipal. That allows for the orderly application of utilities. What you see in Richland County and in South Carolina in general is that because of the restrictive nature of annexation laws, the cities are putting water lines way out into Kershaw County because the developers want to get that water, and that therefore we have a lot of annexations along those utility lines. I would hope that we can have a calm discussion on annexation. It does not hurt the county one bit. It does not hurt the county council one bit for a city to grow. And I guarantee you that the economic engine of the area is the municipal government. And if you do not allow us to grow in a logical and an orderly manner, the whole area will suffer.
In the interest of time and presentation, let's get into Krista's presentation and then do Tracy's, and then we'll have more than enough time for robust discussion.
Okay. Can you do that, Seth?
Oh, I'm sorry. Was there another?
Seth, you can get to that.
Come
one?
in.
Okay.
Yeah, turn your
Please go on with it.
Certainly. Good evening. I am Krista Hampton. I'm the Director of Planning and Development Services for the City of Columbia. And first of all, I want to say I'm delighted to be able to speak to both of you to say thank you. Over the past years, you have provided the resources and support for my colleague Tracy and I to do some terrific work together. Collaborative planning. We had, as an advisor, our commercial node plan. We were able to plan together and coordinate on our land use plans. We worked hand in hand on Walkable 29203, and we are currently in an extremely collaborative planning effort with the Imagine Mill District. So we are working together, and I wanted to say thank you in this opportunity. But we're here to talk about annexation tonight, which is a part of planning. And when people ask me, about how I characterize annexation, I usually say that it is about as misunderstood as a teenager. And so what I want to do is come to you tonight and give you some facts, some basic information, some background. I'm going to talk about our policies, talk about our process, and then I want to address three major areas of concern that we hear regularly so that we can hopefully get on the same page. So first, and this is very high level, a lot of this information is in your backup materials that have been published, so please look to find that there. Our annexation policy, what I want you to take away is that this is not the only way we intend to grow. This is part of a larger growth strategy. We focus heavily on infill and redevelopment of our current city areas. We're looking to grow there as well as through growth of our boundary. The objectives of the policy include establishing a coherent and comprehensible boundaries. They set out the parameters for annexing properties and the provision of water service, and it establishes an urban service area. They establish 4 types of areas of service, 2 with priorities, and these are going to be important considering some of the issues we've heard. The priorities established by our council are donut holes. These are the areas of the city that are surrounded by unincorporated areas, surrounded by the municipality. These are areas where you have to have a trash truck run all the way through the city to go and pick up that trash, where people can't tell whether they're in the city or the county. That's a priority. Primary areas are our second areas of priority. These are directly adjacent to the city, and we have studied and have found that we can adequately provide services. Previously, the geographies that Council has focused on are donut holes in the Rosewood area. We very effectively closed up many on the Farrow Road area and in Clemson and Spears Creek. As far as our future priorities, those have not yet been determined. Our Council is currently working through those with us, keeping in mind that donut holes in primary areas are those focuses. This map, again, please take a look at it online, shows our priority areas. The red are donut holes. The yellow is our primary. Those here from the area around the Wilson Boulevard will notice that we have not identified that as either primary or secondary at all, that we have no intention, according to this current priority plan, to annex in that area.
Say that again, please.
Our urban service area and priority plan has no intention of annexing in the Wilson Boulevard area. Moving on, so the process for annexation is established by the state. It establishes 3 methods for annexation. I won't focus on that. It will put you to sleep. I want to just focus a little bit on what the city does in addition to that with our process. City Council first gives us the direction, and then we act very much as we do with our planning process. We have significant public input into what is going forward. The county will be invited, as we have with some of these other informational meetings, to attend. We will coordinate with service providers to include Richland County. Analysis of the service and needs and availability during these meetings will include the review of county plans. Some of these plans now are city and county plans, so it behooves us to do so. Going on now, just to address 3 of these issues that may have some misunderstanding. First is service delivery. Yes, we want to ensure adequate provision of service. The urban service area has baked into it an analysis to ensure that we can provide those services. If it was not in those areas, we are unable to. But then we go further. So that study was a while back. The process of annexation, especially of larger areas, as Councilman Duval said, is slow. It's very deliberate. So we have the time to ensure that the services are there. The county can ensure that they are still able to provide their services because minimal revenues are lost upon annexation. However, you reduce service obligations. Another issue of concern, of course, it's come out tonight, y'all have addressed this, is the maintenance of rural character and your desire to maintain that character. It is the city's desire to maintain that character as well. Rural land is not prioritized for annexation. If you look at almost all of our current annexations and those that we have looked forward to, predominantly they are previously developed land or land already approved for development by Richland County. We are not interested in rural agricultural land. Finally, we have as a guiding principle, we really want to work on intensification of developed areas to create a critical mass where our infrastructure is within our boundaries. Finally, and rightfully so, you want to ensure that annexations are consistent with the county vision. This can be achieved in a number of ways. We're already way ahead of the game. Our staffs have worked together to create consistent land use plans at those boundaries. So the plan together, right out the gate, we've started working on that consistency. I want to reiterate that the process of consideration for annexation includes review of land use and of your adopted plans. If you look at our summary sheets that go to our council, we mention if there is a plan in that area. And your neighborhood improvement program, which is a gem and a jewel, and y'all should be terrifically proud of that and how it's implemented, it's not undermined by annexation. I think the Broad River Road implementation is a great example, and we are very supportive of NIP. So finally, I just want to leave you with a few thoughts. Annexation is not a zero-sum game where the city wins and the county loses. Strong and vibrant and growing cities are absolutely essential to the health of a region. It takes the scale, the services, the amenities, the infrastructure, the arts and culture that municipalities provide to assist in attracting development and attracting industry. And finally, I hope that you have heard the message that the collaboration that has been going on has been terrific. We have enjoyed it. Your constituencies at these meetings are extremely pleased that we are working together and want to see more of it. So I hope that you will help us continue on with this progress in our annexation program. Thank you.
Thank you, Krista. Krista, is there a way, and I know you shared some stuff with us in the past, a way for individuals who may be contiguous, because I think it was clear, and I'm glad you spoke to it. I didn't have the benefit of the addresses of some of the folks who spoke earlier, but just based on your description of your property, it's not even consistent with the vision of annexing into the city. It's not in our plan or even probably in our logical reach as well. But if someone wanted to take an analysis of I live at XYZ Maplewood Road, and I wanted to come into the city because my neighbor is in the city. My parents, and this is an example I usually use, my parents live just off of Broad River Road behind the Embassy Suites, and half of their street is in the city, the other half's in the county, on both sides of the street. So on certain days you have the city trash collector coming up one side of the road, and on other days you have the county and recycling. If there's a law enforcement response, oftentimes the only way you can actually tell if someone's in the city or the county is by what color the recycling bin is. And at least having some consistency to address those issues of donut holes and even smaller Dippin' Dots. How does someone who is interested in pursuing annexation do an analysis of whether or not this actually adds up for because at the end of the day, it's not only about services, it's also about dollars and cents to families, people who don't want to pay any additional funds or may not want to be in the city for whatever reasons, good or bad.
Certainly, our staff will meet and walk through the financial implications of annexation with anyone who would care to do so. Andrew Livingood is our annexation coordinator, has been doing a perfect job. He's here this evening. We can even, if anybody were so inclined, we'd be happy to set up a meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you. And next, that concludes your remark.
Oh, yes, ma'am. Thanks.
I have Councilman Seth Rose.
Ms. Hampton, thank you for that report, and I appreciate all you do. I see at various events in the community. I represent many neighborhoods in the Rosewood area, and there's a lot of donut holes, and when I go to community events, that's one of the major points of contention. They don't know if it's the county, the city, and within these donut holes, the city has surrounded the area. And so is the process, should I have these neighborhood groups contact you directly, or, I mean, is that, because I know they want to be annexed into the city to stop some of the confusion, and I'm just curious on that process because I'd like to report back to them.
Yes, absolutely. You can contact me. Andrew Livingood will contact them. We will attend the meetings. As we have pledged, we will make sure that the county is involved with those meetings. But it's just about providing them the information and the process and determining the best path forward. But certainly contact me and we'll get.
All right. Thank you very much.
Bill.
Mr. Ian Jackson.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Ian Jackson.
The donut holes problem I've been trying to address for several years, especially in my district, because you have people who have septic tanks, and the city of Annexation built up around it, and that runoff causes flooding, and then their septic tanks doesn't work because of the development of the city, these blacktops and more roads in the area. And that's a major problem. They've been having these problems over the years, and I've been trying. I spoke to the county's the housing development officer, and they said that needs CBDG funds, and then they have to depend on the city if they'll allow them to tie into the system. So we need to have a cooperation to help the citizens. It's about the people we represent. And that's one of the problems I'm having with annexation or these donut holes. We must get together to address this because it's hurting our citizens.
Agreed.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. We have Tracy Hegler, Director of the Richland County Community Planning and Development Department.
try and get this down for me. I'm much shorter than Ms. Hampton, my good friend. Good evening, Madam Chair, Mayor, members of councils, both of you. It's nice to be here, nice to be before you. My name is Tracy Hegler. I'm the Community Planning and Development Director for Richland County, and I'm really glad to be here with my good friend, Ms. Hampton. I mentioned that earlier. Before Ms. Wilson and Mr. Seals asked us to be brief, I assure you that was our goal, Krista and I, to try and simplify this issue, try and take it back a step, and maybe that will help a little bit with Mr. Duvall's concerns. It is certainly a complicated issue. It's passionate, as you've heard from folks tonight. So I'll add very little, maybe just some ideas, some food for thought, and it may rather end mundane for you given how passionate of a topic it is, but I think it's appropriate at this time with an event like this before you. So Krista's already mentioned the city's grown. Obviously, it's done so under the decades-old policy that they've been operating under. No big surprise there. I guess what we're grappling with and what staff has done over the last few months is really started to talk a little bit about, the issue of how are you going to update that policy. And I really don't even want to call this slide an issue. I'll tell you at one point it was about 3 pages long, because depending on where you sit on this debate, certainly there are a lot of questions, considerations, and concerns. But, quite frankly, we know you're updating your policy. You've had a work session to do so. And I think it's just appropriate for us to ask the question, where will that be going? What is your intention? And how can we be at the table with you? What will this look like? So again, just very briefly to reiterate everything Ms. Hampton said, a mundane suggestion, if you will, if you would entertain a recommendation, is simply let us be proactive about working together. I think this is very rare. I've worked in a lot of municipalities and counties all over the country, and this kind of coordination for such a complex topic is not common. I think it would be Nobel worthy if we were working together at this point. You are at a juncture where you are updating the city, your policy, that again is several decades old. Let us be at the table with you. Let us be as proactive as we can to consider what's best for our citizens, what's best for the work we've already done so well together. Our comprehensive planning process was done together. Our land use vision is very similar. We have an opportunity here to make sure that our annexation policies are similar as well, and that we're considering those things. Again, not a lot of fanfare, but I think it's just an opportunity to sort of simplify, step back, ask you where you're going and how we can be a part of that and work with you to make sure we're ensuring, the best future for Richland County.
Thank you. So Tracy, is everyone at the table now or not?
I believe so. I think it's just a matter of, we attended your work session in February. I know that I don't, what kind of work is, where can we talk and collaborate? And I think this is the first step in my mind that we can have this conversation and say we want to be there with you and we want to be there every step of the way and make sure staff is doing that for sure, as Krista mentioned, just a little bit of that continuing.
Sure, and I think the constant sharing of information is so important, but it's clear that everyone is at the table right now. We need to make sure the policymakers have the same information. I really wish Mr. McEachin was still in the room. Is Joe still here? Joe's gone. So let's make sure that we share this information with Mr. McEachin as well, because he spends a lot of time talking about this issue in the community as well. Some of our notes, and I may even pass a legal pad around for some of you who may live in the Wilson Boulevard area. If you want to give us email addresses, even snail mail addresses, wouldn't mind dropping some of this information in the mail for you to share with your neighbors as well, so they have all the up-to-date and accurate information as well. There's some really good data, particularly as it relates to donut holes and the number of donut holes in the city, 156 of them. The number of parcels in donut holes, 3,277 of them. The fact that still, as we speak today, almost 80% of the acreage in the county is still unincorporated. You'd read some of the data or even some news reports, and you expect that the entire county is going urban, and that's not the case, nor the intent, nor the desire, or a good idea, I might add. And I know that most of my colleagues, both in the county council and city council, share that opinion. It's interesting interesting. If we were to continue at the same pace of annexations that we had in 2016, it would take the city of Columbia by parcel 275 years to annex all of unincorporated Richland County. I'm not going to be here in 275 years, and I doubt many of us or any of us in this room will be as well. But this is an issue that's so important, so sensitive, that we're going to push out as much information as possible. So please, as you guys speak to Ms. Hagler and Ms. Hampton, and if you want some direct information from us, and maybe specifically how it addresses you and your family, write your name down on this legal pad, and we'll get you some very direct information that will give you some clarity that your property may or may not be even under consideration. But I know this is a very important and sensitive issue for all of our council colleagues on city council and on county council, and we want to make sure that every information that we have is available and transparent, and that everything that we do is in the interest of effective and efficient government, which also includes the very real public safety concerns that were raised earlier. But thank you, Tracy, and thank you, Krista.
Madam Chair and Mayor, we just talked about a lot of the, I think we all have the same information in terms of the data that the mayor referenced. And it just so happens that on yesterday I was called to an area that's a donut hole within the city, and bordered by everything else is county. And it's a perfect example, I think, that I hope staff would take a look at. I'd be willing to take you to that one spot and talk about the immediate benefits of annexation when it comes to both sides. The increase in property values because of there are little pockets that for some reason don't get the attention that those that are in the city or just solely in the county. And so there are benefits all around, and I think that would be one example that you may want to take a look at, and it benefits both sides, as everybody is saying, from an economic development standpoint, quality of life benefits, and that sort of thing.
Madam Chair, may I be recognized?
Oh, Ms. Meyer.
I represent urban, suburban, rural, all areas, and I'd just like to ask a couple of questions on behalf of those people who, while recognizing benefits of being within the city limits, just don't want to be there, and in fact bought their homes in the unincorporated areas of Richland County and enjoy being in those areas. Just a couple of questions about the water service and how annexation works with water service. Does the water contract as it's currently crafted require acceptance of annexation if it moves to your area if you have water service? I don't understand if there's so would you have a secondary right to say, just because I have water service, I don't want to be annexed, or does the contract permit the city to annex me because I get water service and therefore not require a second layer of consent?
Yes, there was a covenant that is usually applied upon the provision of water service, and that covenant, if called, if you do become contiguous and we request annexation, you do have to complete the petition to annex.
And that's without sort of any other separate layer of desire. It's because I receive water, I therefore must be annexed if requested?
That's correct. And we have many, many residential properties with covenants adjacent to the city that we have not called. What we do with those, generally speaking, is they call us and then we annex them. There are some instances where that occurs, but it's fairly rare, especially with residential property. Hundreds, more than likely, of those parcels that are currently adjacent have a covenant, and we do not call them.
That's sort of the concern that I'm hearing from residents and citizens that I represent. And I might suggest that if it is very rare and if it's not desirable, it might be helpful then to allow the pattern that you've suggested prior to my question, the pattern of voluntary annexation, not annexation based on receipt of water service, that pattern might be more helpful, and if there is a way then to give sort of citizens a little bit more control over their property rights, not just because they receive water service, but because they do have that desire, that might in fact tamp down a lot of the concerns that I'm hearing, because as a person who, Mayor Benjamin and my good friend on the end down there, Mr. Isaac Devine, and my cousin by marriage, Mr. Davis, they all know that I lived in both the county, the city, and I've been as urban as downtown Main Street, as far out as where I now have a home in Gadsden and in the Northeast as well. And I do think that sometimes people who live in rural areas, I can't stress enough how even though you might live in an area that is rural, some parts of it do look very urban because there are developments. You all service Albany Park, and that's very well in Hopkins. They would consider themselves very rural. I would dare say that you might not agree. So I would just ask that if the annexation is following strictly water provision, that there be a separate layer added to that so that citizens have the same right of determination that you said for others, that they can choose.
Correct, and I do want to make it clear that it has to be contiguous. So Hopkins is very far, and
there are parts that are identified on your map on Garners Ferry Road that are directly in Hopkins that are part of the plan.
But yes, but the rural areas are generally not, and so we would.
They don't look rural to you, but they think they're rural.
Understood.
They think they're rural. So that's just a request if you would consider that in the discussion going forward, because that's quite critical to homeowners.
Okay, I have Mr. N. Jackson. Ms. Myers, that concludes your remarks?
Yes, ma'am.
Next, I have N. Jackson and Ms. Gwen Kennedy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. There are pros and cons, and the county spends hundreds of thousands of dollars developing land use plan and neighborhood master plan. And when we spend those money and the neighbors get together, the citizens get together and develop these plans on how their community should grow, what happened is that, and most of the problem lies with the development community, with residential developers and commercial developers. If they come to a part of the unincorporated area and they'd like to do a project and it's not within the plan of the neighborhood master plan, then usually if zoning would deny it in the county, then they go to the city and have it annexed. They'll have the city annex the property, and they make a contract with the city with the water. So whenever these residents move into these communities, the contract has already been there, signed by the developer who bought that property to develop that property. So that's where the problem lies. And what we're having in the past is that, as I said again, that the development community is like they're playing the county and the city against each other. And that's where we have the problem. And that's why I agree with my colleague, Mr. Melanaski, Councilman Melanaski, who made that motion to have some documents from the development community before we approve some of their zoning, so we won't have this problem. Because most people, a lot of people who move to the rural community want to keep the rural character, and they do not like the influence of an urban community or to be annexed into the city. But it does happen. And that's the concern, and that's why we have citizens are complaining about being annexed into the city. They do not want to be. I mean, there's a lot of pros to move into the city or to be annexed into the city. But it's just to have the understanding that the problem we're having is the communication and the development community. They are the ones, if they don't build, we don't grow. And they're the ones who really hold the key into having the zoning and the development in the rural area. And because of that agreement they signed with the water services, you all have the right at any time you choose contiguous to annex. So I'm just laying out part of the problem we're having. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Next I have Ms. Gwen Kennedy. Councilwoman Gwen Kennedy.
Thank you. I would agree with Ms. Myers and what she said, and I'm not going to go over all of that or what Mr. Jackson has said, but I just want you all to be aware and take note the fact I have a lot of areas in my area that have been approached for annexation without any consideration from the members of those communities, and they are really upset about that because they're continuously being told that they're going to be annexed, and they don't want to be annexed, and it's become a problem, and I've had to address this now since I've been on council this short time again, 4 or 5 different times. They've just been told that they're going to be annexed into the city, and they have no desire. They have not asked to come in, nor do they desire to come into the city. And I really don't think that they should be forced into something like this. And that water and sewer system is constantly being thrown back to them. We don't annex you, you don't have water or sewer. And that should not be used against these people. They've been living in these areas all of this time, and that's the way they want to keep it.
Ms. Kennedy, we would be very interested to know who these people are who are making these claims and statements to your citizens. They are making both of our lives miserable, quite honestly, because it is no one from the city who is making these claims. And so if we are able to identify that and try to alleviate some of these myths, it would really help tremendously.
And I know some of them have been bogus, but some of them haven't, because I checked them out, and it was about to happen in 2 of my areas a couple of months back. So the citizens really are upset about it. I've spoken to some people in the city about this already. And
understood. All staff who would be talking about annexation work for me.
Okay.
And none of my staff have been speaking to your citizens. So it concerns me that there are people who may be portraying us as doing so. So I would really, if in any way we can get some of those names and try to ask them to stop, perhaps. Again, it would make, I think, all of our lives a lot easier.
Absolutely, and I'd be happy to work with you with that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. I have Mr. Malinowski. I saw another light come on. It's Mr. Livingston.
And I'll be extremely brief.
I have Mr. Malinowski first, and then you, Mr. Livingston.
Thank you. Go ahead,
Mr. Malinowski.
Ms. Hampton, what is your definition for contiguous that is being used? You keep mentioning the term contiguous.
There's actually a state law about contiguity that I won't try to recite, but it's adjacent, next to, a part of.
Does that include using another type of a common area, railroad track, waterway? Does that count under that definition?
The state actually defined and used some of those that they do not include contiguity, and Councilman Duvall probably knows exactly what those are. Roads do count as contiguity, but there are other...
But for the road...
Right. But for some of these other areas, they
You cannot run down a railroad track, but if the railroad track is between you and the other piece of land, you can go across it. If there's a road, you can go across it. You can't run down
it. So it's not as if you can take it and run for 50 miles, but if you're adjacent, just as like when you're across the street.
Okay, thank you. And also then, when you mentioned that individuals, landowners, are required to sign an agreement saying if you become contiguous, then you must agree to annexation in the city if we provide you a water service. Seems to me that's holding someone a little bit hostage. That would, in my opinion, almost be like the state saying, if you don't be an organ donor, we're not going to issue you a driver's license. So just my thoughts. Thank you.
Okay. Turn off your mic. I have Mr. Livingston next.
Like I said, Madam Chair, I'll be real brief. I'm just extremely encouraged and pleased to hear that we're going to be proactive, we're going to communicate more, we're going to work together. Unfortunately, that has not been the case when it comes to annexation in the past. I'm one who clearly understands the advantage and disadvantage of annexation. I can support it. It's easy and I cannot support it depending on the annexation. But if we can just stick to what we're saying here about communicating and working together, I think the problem would be resolved because it's clearly advantages and disadvantages.
Thank you very much.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. If there are no further comments on this particular item, we want to thank Ms. Hagler, and we also want to thank Ms. Baker for a very good presentation. And It's back to you, Ms. Teresa.
Yes, ma'am. Item 8D, affordable housing, the Honorable Mayor Stephen K. Benjamin.
Sure. Thank you. And if you did sign up, if you haven't signed up, but if you want to sign up, please use your very best penmanship. We want to make sure you get your information, very specific information to your homes on annexation. I shouldn't put affordable housing. I should have put mixed use, mixed income housing because I just wanted to underscore very briefly, there are no attached documents if you're looking online to this discussion. I hope and pray that as we look forward in this enhanced period of regional cooperation and regional leadership, that we'll pay specific attention to the fact that we have a significant need for more housing, workforce housing for families and individuals all across the region. And hopefully some of the creativity that we've shown in the past in trying to address some of our most pressing economic development issues, that we can use the very same creativity on meeting the needs of families that need good, quality, new, and affordable housing across the city of Columbia and Richland County. Hopefully that's something we can work on together, recognizing again that the future of housing needs to be not just affordable housing, but also mixed income housing, and also with a very keen eye on the fact that we have significant families, significant number of families all across the city and across this county and this region who need good quality places to live. And hopefully that's something we can spend some time working on together. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
I think we may be at the halfway mark, Madam Chairwoman.
We're getting there.
Everyone's doing well.
Thank you.
Okay, item E, the Transportation Penny Program. The first item is utility relocations, and the second item is Green Street. I know we have staff persons from both the city and the county, and I would ask Mr. Tony Edwards, the acting director of the Richland County Transportation Department, to come.
Why don't you all go first? When you all go first.
Okay, Mr. Seals wants us to go first. I was trying to go back and forth on that, but in that case, Dana Higgins, Director of Engineering for Columbia Water.
Good evening. My name is Dana Higgins. I'm the Director of Engineering for Columbia Water, and I'd like to talk about the utility relocation. So the city supported the penny referendum in 2012 with the understanding that the penny would cover the costs associated with the identified projects to include utility relocation cost. Our capital improvement program was not designed to address relocation of utilities in good condition, but rather to address our aging infrastructure and to maintain regulatory compliance. The city has put forth funding to upgrade aging infrastructure such as North Main Streetscaping Project, where we have contributed $5.4 million to upgrade our utilities along this corridor. Our service area encompasses most of Richland County, where the voters who approved the referendum and contribute to the penny tax are also our customers impacted by the decisions we are discussing today. Our impact is $34 million. Of that, $25 million is of our water cost, and our typical CIP for water is $40 million. That's after we have rate increases and work with a rate consultant, which we did this year. So obviously that's over half of what our capital improvement program can handle. Be happy to answer any questions, I guess, Ms. Wilson, unless you want Tony to go.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Clearly, the issue of utility relocations have become a source of conflict. And I think there are some things that very clearly we at the county have had to take a hard look at. I think there's a way to resolve many of those issues. For example, when there are city streets and city appurtenances in those streets or underneath those streets, very clearly it seems to me the city should have a say and really should be directive in terms of what should take place with regard to utilities. Perhaps what we need to do, which is what has not been done recently, is to make sure that during the design discussions that the city is actually a part of those up front, because what may happen in terms of, I think, some of the approaches that we've taken is that when we design without getting input from the city, it gives the appearance of a unilateral decision, and that the county is ordering the city to do something, or the penny program is ordering something, and that simply should not be the case. As I said, what we are doing is taking a hard look at the approach that we're taking. I think from a process standpoint, the process needs to be improved. Very clearly, the city needs to be a part of original discussions and design. And I believe that as we begin to look at that, many of the issues will be tamped down and I think work out in a much better way than perhaps they have. What I've asked Edwards to do is to just be brief, but to talk a little bit about utility relocations. But the clear intent is to, from the county standpoint, is to specifically address the issue from this point forward in a way that respects the participation of the city up front rather than it occurring subsequent to the design having been made. The city should be included in that design process, and its thoughts and considerations will be included. Tony?
And that's correct, Mr. Seals. We are looking forward to working with the city on these utility relocations. This is a lot of money we're discussing, and we do need to, in fact, work with the city to see if we can get this issue resolved. I believe it is able to be resolved. We have several options we can proceed with if we begin this coordination, and I just ask that we start that coordination now.
And, I'm sorry.
Sure.
Okay.
Mr. Seals, wait, Mr. Seals, Mr. Seals finished, and then Mr. Davis.
I'll stop. If there are questions.
No. Sam?
Well, I'm going to look forward to the continued discussions, because I think there are some points of this that really do need to be tamped down, and I go back to the original intent of the penny tax itself, and then the projects, and the understanding of how those projects would be funding, and what is included in a particular project. And I think that is the sticking point. So I'd like to see staff work on it, but I think from my perspective, we just want to make sure that we don't, if there's the cost involved, a second cost when you look at relocation, I view that as double taxation, so we need to fix that. I'm hoping we do.
Thank you, Ms. Devine and Mr. Rickman.
Well, I just had a question, because I think, coming together at the design phase is a good way to make sure that there's a meeting of the minds and everybody understands from the beginning. But I guess the question would be is that to say that if the city doesn't pay for the utilities, then at the design phase, undergrounding utilities wouldn't be a part of that project? Is that...
Madam Chair and Mayor, and to Councilmember Devine, the point here is this. If it is a city street and you feel that during the design phase that relocation of utilities is really not warranted, at that point, it really is a decision that the city is making. But what corresponds or goes along with that is the maintenance responsibilities if in fact they do develop in some way in the future. But those are all considerations that are deliberated during design phase, so that what I'm saying is we respect the decisions that you make, and those are your decisions. Those are not the county's decisions.
And I can respect that, and I think that certainly moving forward, we can have those conversations. But as Dana mentioned, when the citizens of the city voted for the penny, who are also county residents, that was the assumption that many people had and still have. We continue to get beat up about undergrounding utilities on different projects, and so I know that was a desire. And so I would just hope that we can come to some kind of agreement on this. Quite honestly, if the city residents had not voted for the penny, it wouldn't have passed. If you look at where the votes to support the penny came from, it overwhelmingly came from city residents. So I just would hope that we could come to some kind of meeting of the minds. Undergrounding may not be able to happen at every single project, and I think we can, that happens on our projects, we can understand that, but if we could try and figure out that at the tail end or the front end, then our citizens would not be blindsided or feel like, well, if the city doesn't come up with extra money above and beyond what the city residents are paying with the penny, then it won't be undergrounded.
And as a moment of clarity, we're actually talking about DOT roads, not city roads.
Right. Yeah. That's the point. Although they're in the city, they're not owned by the city.
How are things handled on city roads?
On city roads, we are prior rights, obviously, because we own the city road, so there's no relocation cost to the city.
You and obviously so well singing from the same hymn. Are you done, Ms. Devine?
Yes. I think that we just need to have that conversation moving forward.
Yeah. Catch your microphones. Yeah. Did you want to speak first, Daniel, or should I go ahead and say something? Okay, sure. And just as a point of just a little bit of history, Ms. Devine referenced some of it. I was there in 2010 when we first took up the transportation penny vote, and the vote actually passed in the incorporated area in the city and failed in the unincorporated area of the county. In 2012, it passed again in the city by a significant margin, almost 4,500 votes, and the overall margin of victory was 6,500 votes. Again, strong support from the residents of the city. At no point during that time, and indeed I have one of the presentations, and I've shared this with some of my colleagues on City Council and County Council, at no point was there some discussion that the cost of utility relocation would not be borne by the transportation penny that the voters in both the county and the city were voting for. The discussion regarding prior rights, and indeed we have of the documents that we have had the opportunity to retrieve, the discussions around alternative funding sources never included an additional source of revenue from residents of the city of Columbia, and only at some point later in the process. Indeed, I have one of the presentations from the penny, from the PDT from 2013 that shows a project in which utility relocation costs were contemplated. The discussion regarding DOT roads and prior rights, and then opening up another source of revenue, is something that's caused us a great deal of consternation. And it's one of those issues that has led us to a point where I think we can disagree and disagree in an agreeable format. And I think that's when you go back to the documents and the original documents that we don't have access to. But it'd be great to continue to have a good, strong conversation around the predicate question as to whether or not the relocation of utilities was contemplated in the $700+ million that citizens voted on when they voted for the transportation penny. Not whether or not DOT has the right to assign their prior rights to a local government, one of the 46 counties, but whether or not the voters voted for something, and whether or not those wishes are being reflected. We have some documents that speak to our position fairly strongly, and if in fact there are other documents that might contradict it, then that would help us significantly illuminate the discussion. But I don't at any point disagree with the idea that anyone's sharing false information with each other. We have a fundamental disagreement. So let's just figure out, going back to the documents that were presented in 2012. But it is important to note, and this kind of goes again maybe a little bit deeper than the annexation issue and the other issues we're discussing, guys. Not only were the votes in 2012 reflective of the fact that we were in this together, the fact is that we are in this together. The people of Columbia, overwhelmingly, with the exception of a very small portion, live in Richland County, pay taxes in Richland County. Of the $90 million or so collected in property taxes, at least a third, if not more, come from people who live in the county. If, in fact, the estimates that we initially put out when we campaigned for the penny in 2010 and 2012, that 40% of those dollars would come from people who live outside of Richland County, has remained, in fact, to be the case, then at least probably a third of that, if not more, comes from people who also live in the incorporated area. So a vast majority of those pennies are coming in from people who don't live in the unincorporated area of the county. So we're in this together, and we've got to figure out how, again, together, we move forward with a full and transparent sharing of documents, and just figure out how we break through this log jam. A lot of these projects are not just important to individual members of council, city council or county council. I think all of the projects, as articulated on the list of priority projects, are important to all of us. Most of Clemson Road is not in the city, but I will tell you, it's a huge priority of mine and I know city council to get that done ASAP. The work that we cut the ribbon on together today in Councilwoman Meyer's district was a fantastic job that reflects, again, the power of regionalism. The state fair, the city, the county, and of course the University of South Carolina. We're doing some things right. So let's share as much information as possible that supports our respective opinions, and let's punch through and get something done and get this moving. I know we can do it. Mr. Rickman.
You said it all, Mr. Mayor, so don't have too much to add, but I would like to make a suggestion. There are a lot of issues between the city and county that could be resolved by us sitting at the table, and what we're doing here tonight, in my opinion, is not really sitting at the table. We're looking out at a back wall back there. We need to be sitting around table, looking at each other, taking one of these issues one at a time and solving them. A lot of the things that are on the table are policy decisions, not staff decisions, and we need to go ahead and make the time, sit around a table together and resolve these issues and move on. There is a lot of business to be done in our community, and we need to be focused on growth. Thank you.
Well, Mr. Rick, I want to piggyback on that, because one of the things I think coming out of this, after tonight, I believe we will have a roundtable discussion, and this is what I'm hoping for, that we will have a roundtable workshop to address all of the issues that we talked about tonight, and that way we can be more on the same page and relieving staff of some of the hard work they're having to do. And that's what I'm looking forward to, is trying to have a work session come out of this discussion tonight.
Madam Chair.
Yes, I got a little list going on here.
Oh, okay.
Okay, I got Ms. Myers, Mr. Malinowski, Jackson, Manning, then you. I can put you down, Mr. Duvall.
Just a quick question asked. I think we're talking about undergrounding versus relocation, and just wanted to point out that they're two different things. Relocation is always going to come up. Undergrounding is, something that's lovely to do and great to have if we can do it. But if there's no money there, there's just no money there. So that's slightly different from utility relocation, which I think is the subject of the concern, if I'm not mistaken. Okay. And then the second thing is, with all due respect to my friend, Mr. Benjamin, Steve and I have been friends a long time, but I just would like us to be really careful when we're here to work together, and so let's be careful about the sweeping nature of the statements that the majority of the penny being paid by, residents of the city versus the county. We're all in this thing together, and the penny is coming from all over Richland County, and there are a lot of folks in the unincorporated areas who are contributing a lot of money themselves to the penny. 2022. And we know just based on population numbers that we've got, and you can look at the number of council members who represent people who are outside of the city, that there are a lot of people there too. So I would just point that out because that's very important. And I think sometimes it gets lost because you may live, 20 miles outside of the city on a 33-acre tract, and you may not see a neighbor for 5 miles, but within that area there are neighbors, and they too are concerned about how we're spending this penny revenue and where we're investing. I am for working with the city to make sure we resolve this. I have great respect for tons of my friends who are on the city council and who certainly work hard every day in the city government. But I just would like us to, not come to it from, looking at it kind of tribally, but just to say, this is an issue. I want Mr. Jackson's utilities to be relocated so Clemson Road can get finished, and I want mine on Bluff Road in phases 1, 2, and 3 done, and on Shop Road and all those areas. And they do touch and concern the city as well as the county. So just to note that even the folks who are not in the city do care about that, and they're paying the penny.
That concludes your remarks. I have Mr. N. Jackson.
What happened to me?
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's Malinowski, right?
Put me there. Yeah, Malinowski there. You.
Mr. N. Jackson.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. And first of all, to Councilman Rickman, in February, I made a motion in County Council that the city and the county do have a meeting to discuss our differences, whether over breakfast or lunch, but that roundtable discussion. I thought that's what we were going to have today, but then I was informed by my chairwoman that no, it's slightly different, but we will have that soon. My concern, and I'll refer to Mr. Edwards, could you explain the policy of having utilities on a state road? And was that in the referendum? Because there seems to be a misunderstanding, and I think what took place was the policy or how we usually do business with SCDOT and utility relocation versus what we thought or assumed that was in the referendum. So could you explain the policy with SCDOT and the relocation for utilities?
Yes, sir. On SCDOT roads, they require that wet utilities be removed from under the asphalt. So when you widen the road, the water and sewer, or what I'm referring to as the wet utilities, have to be relocated outside of new asphalt. So if you widen from 2 to 5 lanes, the water and sewer lines that would be in the shoulder will now have to be moved to the new shoulder, which would be outside of the 5-foot lane.
Okay, and the responsibility.
To clarify that those are DOT projects, and they're agreements that are done between DOT and the entity. They're not assignable, and that's the big difference in this discussion. We need to make sure that when we're discussing this, that we're laying all the facts on the table. And I've heard everybody say we're in this together, but it seems like the taxpayers in the city are being asked to pay for the same stuff twice, and that's not what the intent was.
Oh, okay, and that's what I'm trying to get.
That was your point of clarification. Okay, Mr. Jackson.
Okay, that's what I'm trying to get clear, so we can all be on the same page, so there's no pointing fingers at each other who's doing what, right? My question is, I know it's a DOT road, right? And some of the funding or the money from that will be reimbursed also from the STIP, which is the Statewide Transportation Improvement Program, which we get the funding from for that project from DOT. Am I correct?
Correct.
Okay, so what I'm saying is that it's a state DOT road, and I'm just this misunderstanding about the referendum. I just want to be clear if that's in the referendum or that there's a misunderstanding so we could move forward. Surely I want to see Clemson Road and all the other roads move forward and pave. One of the problem I'm having is, especially with the PDT, I'm hearing that the original estimate for these projects now are almost 2 or 3 times more. And if we're going to have that problem now that, for example, we had $10 million for a project and now it's going to cost $30 million, where will the money come from? Or what's going to happen to other projects if we use up the money? So we have to have a meeting of the minds. We have to sit down and work this thing out, because I'm hearing we're overspending and the money is not enough. I'm understanding also that in the referendum that any new or widened projects supposed to have bike lanes. and I haven't seen any in some of the projects. So I just would like us to get together so we can have that discussion, and we can move forward and make sure, for example, I represent both rural and incorporated area. And what I've seen is most of the projects in the city has gone through or completed, and the rural area hasn't started yet. We have so many dirt roads to be paved, and only one dirt road has been paved over the entire time with the penny tax money. So I have those concerns also, talking about the city and the citizens of the city who pass the penny tax. The citizens in Lower Richland work hard, and every week the people who are advocating for the penny tax came to Lower Richland, right, and make promises, and these citizens in Lower Richland vote for the penny tax. So I'd like to see some benefits for them also.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Jackson, and that's what the purpose of the workshop will bring all of that out, and we can have that further discussion. Next, I have Mr. Malinowski, Mr. Manning, and Mr. Chip Jackson. In that order.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd just like to, what I believe is, put a little clarity out there. All these numbers are being thrown around as far as the number of voters within the city voted for the penny tax versus how many in the county voted for it. Everybody needs to remember, put it in perspective, there were three main topics out there, three main items to be paid for. Roadways, the continuation of bus services, and the third one was greenways, bike paths, and sidewalks. So unless you've taken a survey and know specifically how many people voted for the penny tax because of roadways, I don't think anybody should be taking credit for these people voted for the penny because of roadways. Thank you.
Okay, next I have Mr. Manning.
Thank you, Madam Chair. When we have the work session, if we get some information about the notion of utilities, I know that my wife and I do not live in the City of Columbia, but we get City of Columbia water. I was kind of thinking we got that
Is that Daniel?
as a utility, kind of like we get SC&G power, gas, and AT&T telephone. So I'm kind of hearing the way taxpayers in the city, so I'm guessing that residents of the city don't get a water bill like we do because it's a service of the city, not a utility. If it's a... Did you want to say something to that?
I'd love to address that. Actually, our service area is not just the city limits. Our water area expands through Richland County, Lexington County, and the city limits. That was a point I made earlier.
Right.
Our
So
sewer area is a little smaller.
So you're saying the people that do live in the city get a water bill?
Yes, sir.
Because it's a utility?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so when I'd just like that to be part of the work session, because if power's a utility and you get a power bill, and if AT&T telephone is a utility and you get a phone bill, if everybody has a utility called water as a utility, not as a taxpayer you get water, then I don't understand how we're separating out that it's a double taxation if people are having water as a utility.
So the water and sewer is considered a public utility? So maybe that's...
I think, Jim, what the comment was not about the water bill. It's about that the people in the city also pay the penny tax, just like the people in the unincorporated areas. So
I get that.
But if the city were to have to pay for relocation, that would be part of the fees that our people pay. So I think Daniel left. Is that your problem?
No,
I think that was. Did that answer your question?
No, not at all.
Okay, well, I don't think we are going to resolve all of these. I think we are lining up the issues that we need to put into the work
Which is what I
session.
asked for. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, so will that get your question answered during the workshop, Mr. Manning?
Yeah, Mr. Jackson.
And then next I have Mr. Chip Jackson. I think you have Mr. Duvall, okay?
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's unfortunate that the intent of the the bond was not put in writing at the time it was passed, because I think had it been, and we probably wouldn't be here tonight. And I'm real happy to see that the Kumbaya Fest has sort of come to an end, and we're getting down to and being very candid about the differences of perspectives and views. I think that's important to have that, as you use the term, Mr. Mayor, that robust conversation. If there were a bottomless pit of money, obviously we'd be real clear about how this problem would be resolved. Because I think the larger question is the funding capacity of the penny versus the projects all over Richland County that need to get done. And simply because there's not enough money to get them all done, based upon what's being projected, based upon what my colleague, Mr. Norman Jackson, said, the cost overruns, it's now put us in this sort of precarious position, so that now all of a sudden, no pun intended, but every penny counts. And so now we're at this point. And so we have to make sure, my concern has been that we make sure that two things happen. Ms. Wilson has said that, and Ms. Seals said that as well. One, that we don't stop and delay projects that need to be completed, and there are two that in particular, that we address those, and we address those post haste so that bids can go out and other work can be done and those projects can be completed. Even if it means compromising on both the city and the county's part for those small amounts of money for those two projects. And then for all the future projects that are yet to come, that the dialogue and the conversation at the beginning, rather than in the middle or at the end of the projects, occur. When you got a project that's probably 65 or 70% done and complete, and now there's a debate about who's going to spend 1% of that project's funding to cover a utility cost, and the project is not moving forward because of 1% debate, it just doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. So I hope that those conversations and discussions will happen, but more importantly, I hope that we will resolve those two outstanding issues, those two outstanding projects quickly so that they can resume. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Mr. Duval?
Mayor, Council, I wanted to make the point that Mr. Jackson just made. The county has agreed that if we have prior rights on an area, that the penny tax will pay for it. So what we're talking about is that small percentage of the project that is not under prior rights that the county now wants the city to pay for. These should be taken up by the penny and paid for by the penny, because they are stopping projects that need to be done. And then if you look at the total cost involved, they're minuscule when you look at $1 billion worth of project over the years of the penny. So I would say let's get this thing behind us and move on without worrying about that small percentage that's going to have to be paid for out of the penny.
The council person down there. I think you have Ms. McBride.
Ms. McBride, you recognize.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, I really want to compliment the staff on preparing this document. I did read every page in it.
I did too.
And I thought it was very good background information. I was sort of surprised that, and I think that we probably, when we roll up our sleeves and start to work, that we will be able to look at the pros and cons of each issue. You were not able to hear you heard some of the pros and some of the cons, and this is probably the first discussion where we looked at the pros and cons, which is very good. Ultimately, I think that we're all very independent thinkers, and that we have different opinions, but we all want what's best for the citizens of Richland County and the city of Columbia, because Columbia citizens are part of Richland County. So when we get down to really deciding what is to be done, I would like for us to keep in mind that no one will get everything that they want. So that we must think, and everybody at this table must begin to think about a consensus that we will have to come to. And with the consensus, that means that, again, no one is going to get everything they want, but hopefully the citizens will get what they need. So as we prepare for our next meeting, where we can really get down to the nuts and bolts of things, that I look forward to working with everyone. And again, I just want to thank my county council chairperson and my mayor for calling this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Two very quick points of clarification. And I have a dear friend who's a federal official who says, in God we trust, everyone else bring me data, okay? Councilman Malinowski, it wasn't my intent to say that the reason why people voted for the penny. I was just recounting the numbers and the fact that the votes were where they were. I did not dare you mention that the majority of the penny is generated in the city. It's not. I was just relying on the fact that when we went out and campaigned for the penny, the belief was that 40% of the revenue for the penny would come from those who lived outside of the county. And if that indeed held true, then even if just a third, since about a third of the taxes that come into the county come from the city, or maybe a little more than that, then if that same analogy felt true, then the majority of the taxes collected by the penny would be collected from those who live outside the county and also people who live in the city. That was the only point I was making. And it was just meant to be illustrative, not necessarily, not provocative. But I go back to one predicate question that probably would solve everything for everyone. And it goes back to transparency in government and exactly what we sold the taxpayers in Richland County. Do we have any documentation that says to us that the relocation of utilities was not going to be contemplated in the overall $1 billion or $700 million that was meant to be spent on roads? Because I have documents that suggest, yes, that utility relocation costs were contemplated. And it may have been on some projects, it may have not been on other projects. But do we have something that makes it clear that when we told voters what they were voting on, that those who didn't live, who may have lived in the incorporated areas, that may have had state roads in those areas, that we would then go back to the state and ask for the prior rights to come back and ask for additional resources from those who live in the incorporated areas. Is that somewhere in documentation that you guys can share with us that might actually probably resolve this issue fairly quickly?
I don't have that information in front of me with in respect to the state routes and major projects, but I do know some of the neighborhood plans did include utility relocations and undergrounding that Ms. Myers mentioned before. But I can check on that and get in.
So would follow that if in fact those projects move forward and they happen to be state roads that run through neighborhoods, then would the city still be asked to pay relocation costs, although they were contemplated in the long list of penny projects that voters voted on in 2012?
Well, I think we're kind of mixing the projects. The neighborhood improvement projects are on some state roads, but the major widenings are on your larger main lines on your state routes.
I think it's a great idea, I might add, and I appreciate it being offered up, that we spend a great deal of time, if it's our city engineer or transportation planning folks, that I think as much time and energy as we can spend together to recognize efficiencies. I do believe that we should do that, and I think that will help everyone. But we've got to go back to answer the initial question, and no one has yet disagreed with me. So unless that's a position that someone holds, did in fact we anticipate utility relocation costs to be included in the cost of the penny or not? If we did not, then it would be wonderful to share with our council some of that information so that we can move on to the next issue. If in fact it is included, then I believe that we have to deliver to the residents of Richland County exactly what we told them that we were going to do. And we only have a limited amount of information. The amount of information that the county provided online during the discussion in the run-up to the 2012 vote was copious and it was exhaustive. I mean, it was a lot of good information that I think was the reason that we were able to push. And I was out there pushing hard, just like a whole lot of other folks were pushing for the vote. That type of transparency helped us get the vote across the county. But we don't have those documents. Only, I'm not sure the county or the PDT may have them, but that may really help us get over this issue, because while it might not seem consequential to many of you, we're talking about probably $30 million, I think is the number Dana talked about. So we're talking about real money and significant resources. So we're trying to get to the crux of the issue. And this, Antonio, this is, you just happen to be the guy standing there. This question is not for you, is not necessarily for you. But if there's information that we need to consume that might illustrate to us exactly what's being shared and might illuminate for us, that could probably shut this conversation down pretty quickly. But I completely agree with Ms. McBride, obviously, and we all aren't going to get everything we want, and the importance of compromise and working together is so important. But we also got to make sure we do exactly what we told the voters that we were going to do. And yes, I want to make sure all these major projects that we're moving forward on are not held up by minor disagreements. We can get it done. Thank you.
Mr. Tony, one of the things I'd like you to do and staff to do to make sure that you've heard the questions, you've heard the concerns. All I'm asking is that you provide the data. And once we get the data that is to confirm what the mayor just said, we need the data. And I think that's what's missing in this conversation. And once we get that, we can move this very quickly. And I think that would be one of the discussions that we need to have when we come to the work session. So thank you very much.
Madam Chair, as a point of clarification.
Yes, sir.
If I may. Now, my understanding was that we didn't just dream up that 1.01 billion figure. That all the projects, that somebody had priced those out and had come up with the prices for each of the projects, and then all that got added up, and then the bus money got added up. If that's true, which was my understanding from way back, then I think those documents that detailed specifically what all was going to be the cost, come up with the total cost for each of the projects, that's the document. Wasn't that a group out of Charlotte bankrupting somebody? Parkins and Frankstone?
Okay, we got to keep...
I mean, am I right? Was there not a group sometime way back that came up with those costs to each of the projects? Then we added that up, and that's how we came up with 1 point whatever billion. So to the mayor's point, I would think that's where we would go back and see whether or not moving utilities was a line item in that. So I think that's where the documents are. Thank you.
Thank you. Seth, did you still want to speak?
Yeah, I have a question. What I'm hearing is the original referendum didn't specify who would pay for the utilities.
We don't know
correct?
that. We're trying to determine that. That's what we're trying to determine.
But it would be easy to determine if it existed, right? I mean, if it was specifically in the document as to whether or not it was included, it would be easy to determine. And it's not. And the point that I'm trying to make is, I come from maybe a little different perspective where I actually didn't endorse the penny. I didn't come out against it. I didn't come out for it. I said I'm going to let the citizens go to the polls and vote yes or no. Because who am I to tell a citizen they can't go push a button as to whether they want something or not? But I don't think that city residents went to the polls when a list of projects were put out in a referendum and said, if you vote for the penny, here's what's going to happen. And then we laid it out by council district. I don't think, and I think common sense would dictate, no one thought that if this was to pass, that there would be an additional $30 to $34 million impact on city residents. And we're talking about the relocation of water lines. The city's going to have to absorb that cost in some way. And that could not only push to city residents, but county residents in the form of rate increases. So then we start talking about double taxation for these projects, not only in the city, but in the county. And so that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you. I think I had Mr. Seals, from my perspective. Mr. Seals?
Yes, Madam Chair. And to the request for information, the document that is being referred to is the Parsons-Brickerhoff report. We'll make sure that is provided, particularly when the councils come together in the follow-up workshop. And certainly the precepts and what underlined the pricing, because it was primarily a pricing document, that will provide perhaps some answers to some of the questions.
Okay, thank you. I think we've spent a lot of time on this issue, and I hope all hearts and minds are clear. And then our next, Miss Teresa, you still got the Green Street.
We do have
that would take.
Well, I think it's related, and I believe both Mr. Seals and I are certainly going to work towards an expeditious resolution of this issue because there are projects that are being held up, and I guess we'll wait with you, Madam Chair, Mr. Mayor, to determine a date for this work session. So we just want to get direction so that we can make sure we move this along. And with Green Street and any of the other pressing issues, if there needs to be some direction given for those particular matters before we would all be able to come together. So I know how schedules are, and we just want to make sure that a lot of the folks that are asking us, that our stakeholders, get clear resolution to that.
Well, Green Street's moving forward, right? Is that my understanding or not?
Green Street is moving forward. The delay in Green Street rests with the rail.
I think we're in pretty
and we're
shape.
Anticipating response probably in November, but obviously we can't speak for the railroad.
What about Clemson Road? Just as a matter of analogy, state roads that are in the county, how is the funding of relocation utilities being handled by the penny now? Is an additional source of revenue from the county coming to pay for that, or is that being contemplated in the penny?
The relocations that we are responsible for with regards to the prior rights determination is coming from penny funds, and the ones that don't have prior rights come from the utility provider.
So the prior rights issues in the county by DOT declaration are being paid for out of the penny, but the prior rights designations in the city, in the county, are being asked for to be paid for by the city.
And all utilities that don't have prior rights.
Does anyone see some inconsistency there?
Madam Chair, point of clarification to Mr. Benjamin's
Point of
statement.
clarification, Ms. Myers.
I think what he said was all utilities, and if the city runs a utility, I do think that that is the distinction he's making. I would like us to take this offline to a work session, because I do think that the city of Columbia is different than a utility, and what he's pointing out, and I hate that our staff people are getting hemmed up on this one, because what he's trying to explain is that we're treating utilities the same, but in this case, the city happens to be a utility. So there does need to be additional discussion, but I don't think we can resolve that all tonight.
So that's why I'm saying we're going to move this issue on, and for the sake of time, I'm not going to, and all my colleagues on both sides, I'm not going to.
I agree with Ms. Myers. Obviously, we're going to have to get deeper, but it'd be helpful to understand how it's handled in the county, how it's handled maybe with East Richland or Palmetto Utilities, and exactly just to see again if this is being handled the same way. But again, back to the pressing matters, Green Street's moving forward. What do we need to do, or what can you all do to get Clemson Road moving forward as well, and whatever else may be hanging out there that policymakers might not know about?
I'll leave that to Mr. Seals.
Mr. Mayor, it's a good question. That was basically what I was alluding to in my earlier comments. I do want to have an opportunity to speak with County Council. I do believe that there is a way to move this forward, and I think everybody will be pleased. But I need that opportunity to talk with County Council.
Thank you.
Thank you. That will conclude this particular part. We will go to the very next one, and that will be, if I'm leaving it to you, the next one.
Yes, ma'am. And I know both of our clerks have worked diligently to have some refreshments for the public that was here. I think it's been out a while, and the Okay, well,
But there's food out front, y'all, and refreshments if you.
I'm not looking behind me, Mr. Mayor, so certainly that would be fine.
We want to get through.
Yes, sir.
Sure, and I know that some of our colleagues on city council and county council are going to tell me, and Joyce later on, we told you so, that this agenda was too ambitious. I'm not sure if we're going to be able to get through this whole thing, y'all, and the opportunity to again, sit around the table. I'm not sure if you guys disagree. I actually think this discussion has been fruitful. It's been helpful. I mean, it's a chance to get all the same information at the same time, to share our opinions in a frank and transparent manner. And I think we might be on to the start of something good.
And
that was a long way of saying that. Unless y'all want to, we don't have to go through the whole agenda.
Well, there's only three more items, Mr. Mayor.
Let's do it.
And it looks like we've covered a lot of this in this one, so we should be able to do this one fairly quickly.
Yes, ma'am.
And I mean, I'm thinking we are doing pretty good on time. Let's roll, Teresa.
Yes, ma'am. And
everybody be brief.
The next item is for you and Mr. Mayor, Madam Chair. Richland County Judicial Center at 1701 Main Street in the City Administrative Complex Partnership Opportunities. The Honorable Joyce Dickerson, Chair, and the Honorable Mayor Stephen K. Benjamin.
Okay, now Mr. Sears set me up for this one, so I'm gonna. He did, and I'm turning it over to Mr. Sears.
Oh no, you're not.
He did set me up, but we do know that this is a crucial matter, and we're working very diligently. We have an ad hoc committee who spent a lot of time on this, but I am going to. Y'all notice I don't have a lot of voice, but anyhow, Mr. Sears is going to help me get through this. Mr. Sears, real briefly now.
Okay, very brief.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
Mr. Mayor, you want to?
She said be brief. I understood it came from you.
I will yield to the mayor.
Oh, no, I just say this, and we'll share. We have all of our staff in here who's been, over the last probably 24 months or more, have been helping us work through the process of potentially building a new city administrative complex that would allow us to pull staff into a central location, possibly on parcels that we've assembled in and around the 1800 block and 1700 blocks of Maine and Sumter, respectively. I know we had some early discussions. I know that Councilman Myers and I think maybe Councilman Rose and some others serve on a committee that met yesterday with the much better looking, much smarter Judge Benjamin. And if there are opportunities, I think we just need to, Madam City Manager and Mr. Noach and others in the room, Ms. Gentry, let's share as much of the public information that we can about what our plans are, because I believe if there's an opportunity for us to work together on a complex that might help us all meet our needs. I would tell you, I hear from my wife all the time about a courthouse. I know that Councilman Rose, when he's in her courtroom, hears it as well. He can't escape out the back door fast enough, but the need for a new county courthouse, I know the solicitor was here earlier, he shares that opinion as well, but I think the opportunity is to potentially do something and do something meaningful together. I will tell you there's enough diversity of thought on our council even as to how we proceed, if it's a public development or a public-private development or something we do in partnership with the county, we're wide open. So let's share all the information. And you got some creative folks, creative staff, administrator, and council members as well. Let's see what we could potentially do together. But we've assembled a parcel, I guess, north of 2 acres or so that we believe presents some opportunities to do something meaningful in and around downtown. We think it could be much more meaningful if we potentially did something together. That's it.
Thank you, and I really want to put Mr. Seth Rose on the spot because he is chairing that committee for me, and he did an excellent job on that yesterday. I was on a phone conversation because I was coughing over everyone. But anyhow, Mr. Seth, do you have anything to add to what the committee talked about yesterday? Because this is a very important issue for us, and it's important for our citizens, and a better complex we have would be a better way to serve our citizens more expeditiously. So, Mr. Rose, please give me a little 2-minute break.
We did have a committee meeting yesterday, and we also have members, as the mayor mentioned, from the judiciary, some judges that are family court judges, general sessions judges that are in the Richland County Judicial Center a lot. We have a entity right now that is doing a study based on the space needs of the facility. They go around to everyone that's currently housing the courthouse, determining what needs they have from a space point of view. And they're also in the midst of assessing if the current location can be salvaged. And if it can be, we're in the process of determining exactly nailing down those figures. And that's kind of where we're at. Obviously, this is a very expensive undertaking. I think, I speak for myself, and I'm sure a few other colleagues, if not all, that we think that the county courthouse, or I think the county courthouse, I should say, should be in a very central location. But obviously, when you're talking about purchasing property on Main Street, it could be extremely, extremely costly. And that was one of the things when we started this discussion, was to say we think there's a benefit for the city and the county, I'm speaking for myself, to have the county courthouse on Main Street. But if it is determined that the current location, for various reasons, which has outlived its life expectancy, cannot be financially viable to be renovated into what we need from a county perspective, if it was to stay on Main Street and the cost, and Main Street's doing amazing, we all know that, we would need some assistance. We would like to have some assistance to keep it on Main Street. And we think there's a dual major interest in seeing that occur if it's possible. Other than that, I mean, that's kind of where we're moving forward. I mean, this is, the last thing I'd say is this is a building that's outlived its life expectancy, and it's the people's building. If you go there to get a marriage license, you're going through probate court. If you're going through marital issues, if you've been accused of a crime, if you're a victim of a crime, I could go on down the line. But this is the people's building, and we need to do something about it in the times now, and I think it presents an amazing opportunity. But that's basically it.
Thank you, and I'm not going to belabor that any longer. We'll just continue the conversation going forward. I believe we can do this one really quickly, the next two very, very quickly in the next 5 minutes. You think, Ms. Teresa?
We'll try. I know that there are some
5 to 6 minutes. Are my colleagues agreeing 5 to 6 minutes?
Yeah.
Okay, let's go.
We will certainly try, Madam Chair. The item is 8G, Utilities, City Water and Sewer Utility Expansion and Approvals. Clint Shealy, Assistant City Manager for Columbia Water.
Good evening, Madam Chair and Mr. Mayor and council members. I promise to be brief. I've got Joey Jaco here with me in case there are other questions. He's our Director of Utilities. Columbia Water serves approximately 400,000 people in the Midlands with clean, clear drinking water, and we also provide sanitary sewer service to approximately 200,000 people, and we serve customers both in the city limits and in the unincorporated areas of Richland County and Lexington counties. And as a public utility, we take the responsibility of providing quality services and complying with regulatory requirements very seriously. We understand the county's concerns about land use planning and the desire to monitor and control growth. And to that end, we would propose to work with Richland County staff to share our proposed capital improvement plan each year and to have open dialogue about how to meet both the city's infrastructure needs and goals for the water and sewer system as well as the county's needs. However, we believe a formal approval process would provide an undue delay for development projects, potentially deterring economic development. And in addition, and moreover, as a utility provider, for us to cede approval authority for projects that we may need to do for regulatory purposes or to meet a level of service that our customers expect and that we want to provide, that makes us uncomfortable. And so to that end, we believe that communication and collaboration is the best way to approach this issue moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Clint. We also have Shahid Khan, the Director of Richland County Utilities.
Madam Chair, Honorable Mayor Benjamin, council members, good evening. I think my friend Clint has taken 4 out of the 5 minutes I had, so I have to be half a minute. I'll be very brief and simple. What we had is back in April this year, there was a motion made by Councilman Mr. Malinowski, which basically requires all the utility providers not specifically just the City of Columbia, to take prior consent and approval from the council for any expansion, upgrade of the infrastructure that would be in unincorporated boundaries. The matter has been put into the Development and Services Committee. It has been discussed. There is some additional data requested by the council members and staff, legal. We are working on that. The matter is pending in the Development and Services as we speak, and would be discussed in the due course. However, the goal remains to work with the city, work with our friends across the street to street, and all to all, looking after the best interest of our constituents, citizens in Richland County and City of Columbia, and wherever we can.
And so would we wait for the Richland County Committee to take action on that, as just for clarity for city staff, Madam Chair? Okay. So at this time, we will continue to operate as we have been. Oh, okay. Item 8H. Okay, the fees for services from the Alvin S. Glenn Detention Center. Mr. Shane Kitchen, Acting Director, Alvin S. Glenn Detention Center.
And
That's not Mr. Shane.
he is.
Sorry.
Actually, this is Captain Moy, and Acting Director Shane is actually out of town, and we'll be brief. The point here, very brief. The point here is that the daily costs to operate and feed at the detention center is around $71.62, and we will. That's correct. And what we will need to do is begin to look at that, and perhaps I think the path forward is to have discussion amongst the staff, and then to look at possible ways for addressing that. There is certainly a formula, but that formula doesn't really allow us to catch up with those costs. And so what it seems to me at this point is we make a commitment to talk with Teresa and her staff, and then to bring forward some possible solutions to the challenge.
We can put that on the work session.
That is correct.
All right.
Captain.
Thank you so very much.
Can we get the
Mr. Devine, Mr. Rickman.
Just for that work session, Mr. Seals, and I think that it's been addressed to a certain extent, but in my professional capacity, I represent a lot of mentally ill clients who are on medication, and I've heard from a lot of clients that when they get incarcerated, the formulary or the capacity for the jail to provide them their mental health medication sometimes is lacking. I know that Judge McCullough has called, and I think that temporarily it's been fixed, but I certainly would like to keep that on the county's radar as your provider, of course, is looking at keeping your costs down. I hope that we don't do that at the expense of the inmates that are in there who are needing mental health medications.
That is a great point. We are not suggesting that we shave costs. The real issue is the cost is going up. We have a population there, and we certainly have some medical staff, but we're going to have to upgrade and to meet some of the real issues that are going on at detention jail facilities. And I think that's the point. Actually, you and I have had that discussion. We clearly need to get there. But the path forward, I think, is to start having those discussions now. Let's look at what the impact analysis will reveal, and then perhaps come back jointly and say what we can do.
That concludes your remarks, Mr.
Mr. Rickman?
Okay.
Mr. Rickman.
Okay. Could we, Mr. Seals, get the financial information and the inmate counts and so forth of coming in as part of that packet for that meeting? Thank you.
Okay. Okay. It seems like we have gotten to the bottom, and this is the order that I'm going to close this meeting out. We have one person who signed up for our second citizen input. Number 9 is for information only. These are for ongoing discussion, so we're not going into those. The next item on this list will be that one person who signed up to have a citizen input. And Mr. Malinowski, can you give me his name?
Yes, Madam Chair, there's Mr. Ray Burns.
And then the next item we have, number 11, will not take place. And I think the executive session we don't need because we're going to forward everything to the work session. Am I correct, Ms. Sears and Ms. Teresa? Okay. And then the next item will be an adjournment. Y'all heard me? And in that order. Thank you, sir.
Hey, my name is Ray Burns, and I'll speak quickly. I'm a Yankee. I'm from North Carolina. I came to Columbia to school and chose to stay here. I love Columbia. We live in the Yorkshire subdivision, and our backyard, our grandchildren cannot go into the backyard because there are holes open from a wastewater a system that's antiquated. It's been there for 35, 40, 50 years. The sinkhole was at one time big enough that you could park a truck into it. Now, I have been speaking with County Engineer Allison Steele. She has provided exceptional service. She calls me back. She says, we're going to do this, that. And the good news is that the city and the county are going to be meeting on the 19th. They can talk about these issues. Supposedly, my issue is a city issue, but the city doesn't have an easement on this property. So the city says, oh, that's not our problem. The county has tried to take care of it, and it's been inadequate. Mr. Jackson knows this quite well. So I want to commend all of you for getting together and talking about these issues. Mine's not a big one. It's very small, but it's getting bigger all the time. So you guys getting together and talking about it, I think is great. I look forward to having any and all of you visit, and before long we'll be able to put a diving board there, and we can all have fun. Thank you. Good night.
Okay. I think...
Mr. McDowell.
Oh, yeah, okay, Mr. McDowell.
Madam Chair and Mayor Benjamin, let me just say a word of personal privilege. This has been a unique experience. We've had an opportunity to hear and to share information. The information hopefully and prayerfully will be information we can continue to work on and work through. The experience tonight has been one of collaboration, one of hopefully developing new political relationships with each other. I would hope that this does not stop. I would hope that when we get together again, whenever that is, that we are able to sense a deeper sense of who we are and what we are about as a city and a county. So, Madam, thank you so much, Mr. Mayor. Thank you all so much for allowing us to be a part of this conversation and this dialogue. Rather long, but very, very beneficial. Thank you all so much.
Thank you so very much. Thank you so very much. I am going to conclude my remarks by thanking each and every one of you, both councils. Y'all, we should give each other a hand because we did so well tonight. Thank you so very much, and I want to thank the audience, especially the citizens that we serve and the staff that work so diligently with each of us to make sure that we provide the right policy to make sure that you have the best quality of life. And because of that, I know it's been a long time. I'm going to cut my remarks short because I know Mr. Livingston will be pulling my coat sleeves if I don't. So thank you so very much for taking the time in your very busy schedule to come out tonight. And with that, I'll turn it over to the mayor for him to make the motion to adjourn.
Yeah, thank you all. Again, I want to thank our respective staffs. I will note, I'm not sure who mentioned on the county council earlier, but when Teresa and Gerald and Joyce and I sat down and we first started talking about this meeting, it was supposed to be over food, as a matter of fact. It was meant to be more social. It was not meant to be this. But I do believe we covered some real territory today. We had some good, frank dialogue. The real work we know is done by staff. I would encourage everyone to continue to get to know each other, make sure we all know each other before we leave this room. And I just want to thank all of our respective bodies and my public sector colleagues for the leadership and the dialogue tonight. Madam Chair, thank you to you for your leadership and making sure this happened. Well, thank you.
Make a motion to adjourn.
It's a non-debatable motion to adjourn.
We are now adjourned. Thank you.
Yeah, we got to
Look at it.